Adapt or die is becoming climate mantra. With the world losing the battle against global warming so far, some say, experts are warning that humans need to follow nature's example. Adapt or die. That means elevating buildings, making taller and stronger dams and seawalls, rerouting water systems, restricting certain developments, changing farming practices, and ultimately moving people, plants, and animals out of harm's way. Adapting to rising seas and higher temperatures is expected to be a big topic at the United Nations climate change talks in Copenhagen, along with the projected cost. Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, much of it going to countries that cannot afford to do it themselves. That adaptation will be a major focus is remarkable in itself. Until the past couple of years, experts avoided talking about adjusting to global warming for fear of sounding fatalistic or causing countries to back off efforts to reduce emissions. It's something that's been neglected, hasn't been talked about, and it's something the world will have to do, said the chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Adaptation is going to be absolutely crucial for some societies. Some biologists point to how nature has handled the changing climate. The rare Adonis blue butterfly of Britain looked as if it was going to disappear because it couldn't fly far enough and global warming was making its habitat unbearable. But, to biologists' surprise, it evolved longer thoraxes and wings, allowing it to fly further to cooler locales. Society needs to be changing as much as wildlife is changing. One difficulty is that climate change is happening rapidly. Adaptation will be particularly challenging because the rate of change is escalating and is moving outside the range to which society has adapted in the past when more natural climate changes happened. Cities, states, and countries are scrambling to adapt, or at least talking about it and setting aside money for it. Some examples. The Netherlands is making its crucial flood control system stronger. California is redesigning the gates that move water around the vital Sacramento River Delta so that they can work when the sea level rises dramatically there. Boston elevated a sewage treatment plant to keep it from being flooded when sea level rises. Chicago has a program to promote rooftop vegetation and reflective roofs that absorb less heat. That could keep the temperature down and ease heat waves. Engineers are installing thermal siphons along the oil pipeline in Alaska, which is built on permafrost that is melting or thawing to draw heat away from the ground. Researchers are uprooting moisture-loving trees along British Columbia's coastal rainforests and dropping their seedlings in the dry ponderosa pine forests of Idaho, where they are more likely to survive. Singapore plans to cut its flood-prone areas in half by 2011 by widening and deepening drains and canals and completing a $226 million dam at the mouth of the city's main river. In Thailand, there are large-scale efforts to protect places from rising sea levels. Monks at one temple had to raise the floor by more than 3 feet. Desperately poor Bangladesh is spending more than $50 million on adaptation. It is trying to fend off the sea with flood control and buildings on stilts. President Barack Obama and Congress are talking about $1.2 billion a year from the U.S. for international climate aid, which includes adaptation. The United Nations climate chief said at least $10 billion to $12 billion a year is needed from developed countries through 2012 to kickstart things. Then it will get much more expensive. The World Bank estimates adaptation costs will total at least $75 billion to $100 billion a year over the next 40 years. The International Institute for Environment and Development, a London think tank, says that number is way too low. It may even be $200 billion a year or $300 billion a year, said Chris Hope, a business school professor at the University of Cambridge and part of the IIED study. Nevertheless, Hope said failing to adapt would be even more expensive, perhaps as much as $6 trillion a year on average over the next 200 years. So he says, adaptation could cut that by approximately $2 trillion a year, said. As much as 3/4 of the spending will be needed in the developing world, experts say. Those are not the countries that caused the problem, Hope said. There's a pretty strong moral case for us giving them assistance for the impacts that we've largely caused. Sending money from rich countries to poor ones raises questions of who will control the spending and whether it will be wasted or stolen. Planned relocation ahead? As for helping plants and animals, one British climate scientist said the world will have to create a triage system to figure out which living things can be saved, which can't and are effectively goners, and which don't need immediate help. It's a brutal way to go about things, he said. And what about people or humans? Some islands, such as the Maldives, and some coastal cities, will not be able to survive rising seas, no matter what protections are put in place, said a senior fellow at IIED. In those cases, he said, the world will need planned relocation of people and cities. So, this will cause a lot of confusion, and it's going to cost a lot of money, perhaps trillions and trillions of dollars for climate change in the future, so the experts say. And again, there's something much more going on here. It could be even worse than this. And again, something much bigger going on. And these are more signs of the end times, transition days. The transition is real. It is happening. And it is a process happening daily all around the world. And there are many signs of all kinds.